Hi, I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. So if you've read the title, it might seem like I'm a little bit behind the curve on this one. Okay, the album's been out since February, so you'd be fair in thinking that. But I actually want to use this example to structure a broader conversation about music and art criticism that I hope you'll partake in with me. The last discussion video I did was so much fun. There were so many brilliant responses. We had a lot of discussions, especially from Billied 2003. Thanks, Billied. Thanks. Also, this isn't a Kanye bitching video. There are plenty of bland and boring videos and articles that you can go and seek out yourself if you want to read about how Kanye's the devil incarnate or any of that shit. That's fine. That's not what this is. I'm not interested in that. Whilst this isn't a Kanye bitch video, I should probably outline my thoughts on the man and the music just to give a bit of context to the topic. In my own humble opinion, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus are two of the best hip-hop records this century. They're both fantastic records. I really like 808s and Heartbreak, and obviously the classic College Dropout. And whilst I try not to let his bizarre and misguided media personality of late get in the way of his music, I can't help but say it irritates the fuck out of me. Your music's great, Kanye, but no one wants to hear about corporations and your struggles with getting footwear out on the market. Oh shit, this isn't a bitching video. Anyway, I don't really like The Life of Pablo. I think it's a messy, unfinished, unfocused piece of work that flails into obscurity when you compare everything else he's ever done. Not to mention, deflating like an old birthday balloon next to the hyperbole and the staggered release schedule we all had to endure back in February. I know this has been quite a divisive record in the music community. Whilst a lot of people like myself think that this is a misguided, unclear collection of tracks that could have done with a strict editor, other people praise Kanye for his insistence to throw curveballs throughout the record, his self-aware lyricism, and his quite daring sampling. I personally don't see it, but that's not the point of this video. Many critics raved about The Life of Pablo on its release, and some even alluded to it being an example of Cubism. So I might hear you say, what is Cubism? Well, the Oxford Dictionary definition of Cubism is an early 20th century style and movement in art, especially in painting, in which perspective with a single viewpoint was abandoned and use was made of simple geometric shapes, interlocking planes, and later, collage. Creators of this visual art style were Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque, using fragmentation and abstraction to portray their subjects in an entirely different way. Here are some visual examples of Cubism for your perusal. So it might be that these journos are simply name-dropping Cubism due to the fact that Kanye has openly had an interest in Pablo Picasso and also the elusive Pablo of the title of the record. Or they might be commenting on the fragmented feeling of the record, more specifically, Kanye's fragmentation of his own personality within the lyricism. You have the outrageous media persona on Famous. You have the man fearing for his wife and child against the media in the track Wolves. And then you also have his self-awareness of being the enfant terrible of the popular music world in I Love Kanye. It must be lyrically right, because I can't think of anything that sounds musically cubist on The Life of Pablo. It's fairly typical 21st century hip-hop production, nothing particularly experimental. So where's that Cubism style coming from if not from that lyricism? Actually, how does Cubism even translate sonically? How does geometric construction and visual perspectivism actually translate to something that you hear with your ears? Well, according to composer Morton Feldman's essay for the Contemporary Music Review, yeah, that's right, I do research for this, don't be so surprised. According to Feldman, it's more of an organizational idea, mirrored at the time of Cubism in the 20th century composers Webern and Schoenberg's use of the 12 tones in their composition, which later became to be known as serialism. If you look at the construction of a Picasso Cubist painting and compare that to a serialist composition, I think you'll probably see the idea that Feldman has here. You're going to hear that fragmentation in the atonality of the serialist music, but also you're going to see some of that meticulous analytical composition that was created within the visual style of the Cubist. Similarly, art Cubist criticism called on the way the rational and conventional was juxtaposed with the irrational and the unconventional, which is something I think will definitely resonate if you try and listen to a serialist piece of work and try and wrap your head around it. It's something that we're not used to listening to. If you don't listen to this kind of atonal music usually, then that's going to be a difficult thing. It really jars with you as you try and listen to it. And if that's if you look at a Cubist painting, that's the idea. It initially jars. You can see an object, but you can't quite work out what it is. You know, the pieces are there, the fragments are there, and you're trying to put it together. And that's very much what it feels like listening to a serialist piece of work. Similarly, Professor of Music David Locke wrote a really interesting essay on musical cubism within African gamelan music, which is African drumming music, lots of rhythms all over the top of each other. He talked about the rhythmic geometry of the composition, so the way these rhythms interlocked and created geometric shapes within the music itself, as well as an interplay of order and chaos. Ooh, what a great quote. Despite these insightful essays on the idea of applying cubism to music, both David Locke and Morton Feldman go on to say it's actually almost impossible to apply a visual artistic criticism to a sonic musical form. That idea, it's a completely different kind of medium, so it's always going to be problematic trying to assert a specific style and historical movement onto a completely different type of medium, because it's not all the same. It's not the same materials we're working with. We're not working with the visual with music, we're working with the sonic. So while it's a really interesting idea, the idea of rhythmic geometry and atonality within serialist work, it's problematic trying to work out how exactly cubism fits within music. This is why we're constantly questioning whether these critical readings can have any merit if you apply it to something like music, for example. Is there merit in calling The Life of Pablo Cubist? Is it Cubist in its fragmentation of personality within the lyricism? If in that case, isn't that just a narrative technique? Is that actually Cubist? Do you think that's Cubist? Basically, what I'm really asking you is calling The Life of Pablo Cubist pseudo-intellectual bullshit at its finest? Well, that's definitely a loaded question, isn't it? And this is why I wanted to talk about this today. I find it problematic when I hear a journalist spout off an art criticism like Cubism, use it to discuss an album like The Life of Pablo. I find that problematic. I cannot hear that in the music at all, personally, and it does feel pseudo-intellectual. You're just spouting an art criticism term to sound intelligent, and you know how I've said today that there's obviously ideas about musical cubism that make sense. You know, David Locke with his African gamelan music within serialist compositions in the 20th century. I can hear how musical cubism is an idea and a theoretical possibility, but I certainly don't hear it within a 21st century hip-hop record, and an unfocused and frankly not particularly good hip-hop record at that, but obviously that's my opinion. But I'd like to know what you think about it. Do you think this is Cubist? Would you identify some of this as Cubism? I'm keen to hear your thoughts. And also, you know, are there any other examples of criticisms within different mediums that you've heard to describe music, and what do you feel about that? An example might be using 1940s film noir from Hollywood to describe a style of music. I've heard that being discussed before. So that and any other ideas you guys have, let me know in the comments section below. And that's it today, that's my thoughts. So yeah, let's have a lot of discussions about this. I find this a really fascinating topic, and it really does branch off to a broader discussion about art criticism and music. So let's all just have a discussion about that. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I know some of you follow me on there, but I'm often rambling, recommending new records, and just up for a discussion on there. So follow me at Deep Cuts Tweets. Thanks a lot. See you next week.